We had a really good interview with Max Smith about the book, The Preparation, and I think you'll enjoy it as much as I did asking the questions and talking with Max. It's good to see that people are actually thinking along the lines of raising your kids for generations to come, as compared to what's been happening is everybody just wants to be their kid's buddy. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a full expose on myself titled Who is Cork Graham and Why Should You Listen to Him? I don't really like to talk about myself the way Michael Yon likes to talk about himself. Sorry, Mike, but you do like to talk about things that maybe you should ask me about a few more in-depth questions about some of the topics you're going into. But anyway, enjoy this episode and definitely stay tuned, because I think next episode will make you understand why everything that I have here is because I prepared and I read the signals back in 2008, and people thought I was nuts for following those hints and suggestions. But hey, everybody else is freaking about food prices, where you're going to live. Wouldn't it have been nice if you thought ahead and you had a hint and the media wasn't trying to put you into a trap? Because that's what's been happening, and I'll go in depth into that. My experience with all this media crap goes all the way back to when I got taken prisoner back in Vietnam, and even before that, when I was an 18-year-old combat photographer in Thailand, covering the American MIA situation, covering the Khmer Rouge fighting. I was 18 years old at the time. I was also still a Marine Corps naval midshipman. That's a story into itself. But we'll be talking about it in the next episode. Enjoy this episode. Pick up a copy of The Preparation. It'll help you. Let me tell you, I can tell from my own experience of how I did not follow the rules and regulations that my dad's generation, the quiet generation or silent generation they call it, the Korean War generation, which is you go to school, you get your degree, and everything will be peachy keen. Well, for him it was. I mean, he became the director of Kohler International for Asia Pacific Rim. That's pretty big for somebody who was almost starving to death during the Great Depression. So, like, subscribe, and please comment below any kind of topics you'd like me to cover in the upcoming episodes. I'm going to start answering questions in the next episode. So, enjoy. Now I got to get some firewood. Nothing better than birds.
Trained journalist, history expert, and combat photographer in Central America.
It was an illegal covert operation. It was one of the darkest moments of my life.
The Vietnamese admitted they had arrested Knight and Graham for violating the territory of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, and they were in prison. But now, the Vietnamese played pirate, demanding a ransom of $10,000 per man.
The British government would not pay a ransom, would they? They don't pay official ransoms. They always make a thing of, we don't pay, otherwise it just happens again.
I was held for 11 months, and 7 of those I was in solitary confinement.
By the 17th of May 1984, Graham was free and returned to America. In the years that followed, Graham's thirst for adventure remained unquenched. He succeeded in working as a photojournalist, and also, ironically, for the CIA during the US war in El Salvador.
Greetings and welcome. This is Cork Graham with the Cork Graham Podcast. We'll be broadcasting on YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcast. For those of you who are watching, I'll actually put up a cover of the book we'll be talking about. I have with me Maxim Smith, and Max is a very interesting man. I call him a man. He's young, but you'll notice that through communication or conversation, why I've been so impressed, and it's basically because he's taken the voyage I think that every man should do, and mainly it's because
it challenges you to achieve the things and define who you are as a man, which at that point you'll be able to develop further. But if you don't get these ground rules set up, you basically flounder, and that's why you meet a lot of men who are in their 50s and 60s and they act like children. And they don't have the development. And it's a type of development that can only be brought about through experience. And some of it's very uncomfortable. A lot of it is very uncomfortable. In the old days, it was brought out by joining the military or going to sea as a merchant marine or getting on a horse and riding out to a ranch and getting hired as a hand. And if you've ever done any ranch work, you realize that the romance in movies and TV are actually way off in relation
Yeah.
to what the activity is, or even actually what the real status was of a ranch hand back in the 1800s. So, welcome, Max. Let's get going, and let's start with how did your father, Matt Smith, and Doug Casey, and who are these people? Who is Matt, and who is Doug Casey, and how did this come about? Well, this is just an idea over drinks that a lot of great ideas do come over, where you're just chatting, shooting the bull, or just having experience, and then it just
Mm.
develops from a kernel like that. So let me let you take away.
Well, thanks for having me, Cork. I appreciate it,
Thank
first
you.
off. Um, but yeah, I've been doing the what we call the preparation for the last few years, and it was designed and created by my dad and Doug Casey. And my dad is a serial entrepreneur. He started about 20 different businesses at this point. Um, and at one point, after reading Doug Casey for quite a long time, he met Doug Casey in Argentina, and that's where the relationship started. But Doug Casey, if you don't know him, he's definitely a Renaissance man and a speculator and kind of a host for a lot of economic thoughts that he puts out into the world and has been putting out into the world for a long time. Um, but Doug has lots of interesting ideas, and one of those ideas, partially because he's lived such an interesting life, are the ideas of how to create a Renaissance man. And a long time ago, about 12 years ago, my dad and Doug were in the car and they were talking about a book that Doug wanted to write about basically becoming a Renaissance man. And the way Doug framed it in the beginning was, you know, Matt, that's my dad's name. I want to write a book about the three primary most important verbs in every language: be, do, and have. And those verbs would be the basis of this book about how to become a Renaissance man. And my dad was like, okay, great. He didn't really understand what Doug was talking about when he mentioned be, do, and have, because it's the idea wasn't fully formed when Doug was expressing it. But my dad didn't actually want to help write the book at the time. Doug was saying how much of a headache it was to write a book. So it was a big turnoff to hear, let's write a book. And then here's every reason why you don't want to write a book. So my
So
dad
so
didn't do
Doug
it.
came up with the idea, but then did he ever tell you what the origins are? Because as we've talked before, um,
Mhm.
my training by my father, as I looked at the things, and I'm going to go through the list of what this original article was that came out in 1933, and I'm really curious because it'd be nice to talk with Casey about, like, did he read this article when he was a kid and go, "Whoa, I should learn how to do this." And this article came out in 1933, and I'll read through the list, which is the things that every young man should know how to do or learn how to do are swim, handle firearms, speak in public, cook, typewrite. Now, you don't have typewrite, do you, in the book? Which is,
Not needed anymore.
who knows if that's even going to be relevant. But ride a horse. I've always felt that's extremely important. Drive a car, and we're talking stick shift.
Yeah.
Dance, drink, and the last one is, and speak at least one foreign language well. And you have pretty much all of these covered except for the typewriting and the drinking. And the drinking is interesting, but that's for another subject.
Well, actually, in the book, one of the activities that Doug has is beer brewing. So we kind of have drinking in there,
Okay.
kind of.
But
Yeah,
he's come in as a
everything except
chemist.
Tupperware.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But Doug brought it up to my dad. My dad wasn't interested. And then years later, when I was 17, about to turn 18, there was a big problem. And the problem was I didn't know what to do. I knew I didn't want to go to college. I knew I didn't want to go into the trades. I knew I wanted some of those skills, but I didn't want to go into the trades because I think I would have felt stuck or trapped. And so my dad saw the anxiety in me that I just was kind of angry at the world for the fact that I didn't know what to do and where to go, and that the options were shrinking. You know, like the options are expansive. There's plenty of opportunity, but at the same time, it's like you step out into space and you can go in any direction.
Hmm.
That's what it felt like. So at that point, my dad went back to Doug and he said, "You know what? That idea you were talking about writing a book about how to become a Renaissance man, I think I want to go back to that and I want to try to write that book because I think it would help me, Max."
Also, this
So I was like, okay.
actually it wasn't just a project that got on its own between your dad and Casey. It was all involved at the
Mhm.
same time. So this was all encapsulated at the same time. That's interesting.
Correct.
Very good. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the whole reason this book exists, the preparation exists, is just because my dad wanted to help me in the beginning,
Yeah.
originally.
Yeah.
And so basically since about July or August of 2023, I've been doing it.
Hmm.
And the first thing Doug gave us, my dad and I, was a list of games, activities, and occupations.
Hmm.
Like a list that you could write on a napkin of skills you should learn, like everything from sales and marketing to skydiving, scuba diving, skeet shooting, like a whole number of skills
Hmm.
within the three categories of skill of games, activities, and occupations. And the first thing I started off with was EMT, becoming an EMT.
Hmm.
And then I went into EMT school, which was a 4-month school in Idaho that I did. And that's
Now,
how
were
it
you
all
a Boy
started.
Scout?
No, no, I was not,
Was
but
your
Doug
dad a Boy
was.
Scout?
No, my dad wasn't either.
Do you know if Casey was a Boy Scout?
He was. He was one step away from being an Eagle Scout.
Oh, wow.
Almost
Okay.
there. Yeah, he was pretty
So a
close.
lot of these things he learned as a Boy Scout, which I find very interesting. That there's been such an animosity because how Boy Scouts has been totally screwed up in the last 20 years. It's unrecognizable and it's a waste of time. Like the military has gone to hell too. Um, it's not the same. You don't get what you get out of it, except maybe become fodder these days. When before you actually would get skills that would, like people came back from World War II, or my father, who was more disciplined when he came back from the Marine Corps after Korea. That played out very well into those people who created, were considered either the silent generation or the greatest generation, who made the wealth in this country that we had. Um, and
Yeah.
Casey got just a smattering of that based on his so he's about 10 years younger than my dad. I'm like looking at his numbers and everything. So my dad was born in 1930, and I guess Casey was born in the early 40s, or yeah, probably like early 40s.
Yeah, I think he was
Yeah.
mid 40s. Yeah.
So, and that's about the end of it. And I know in my own personal experience, so I was born in 64, and I look at my schooling, my education, junior high, middle school, and I lucked out. I didn't realize how good it was, that I went to I went to the Singapore American school when I was a kid in Singapore. And I
Oh,
didn't
wow.
know that the quality of education I had there put me a year ahead of the schooling in the public school system here in the States, in California at the time.
Sure.
And my freshman and my junior year was before the creation of the Department of Education. And then my
Mm.
junior and senior year was after the creation of the Department of Education. And if I was missing already, in contrast to what my father got, graduating in 1947,
Yeah.
in contrast to what I got now, and then look at Casey in contrast to what your dad and me and you got. It's
Mm.
horrific. And we look at this and it's kind of like you and me and all of us are having to either try to replace what was taken away from us in terms of our education. That if you look at like my father's generation, I read his history books, and these are books that you get in for a PhD in university now. And they had to get those through those books in order to graduate high school because they
Yeah.
knew that a lot of those guys never went to university. They went to a trade
Right.
school. They were farmers or they were ranchers. This is Spokane. So they knew that they couldn't, they might not go, most likely would not. My dad was the first in our whole family line to ever go to university.
Mm.
And you still had to be an American citizen. You still had to think critically to be able to just to vote. And they wanted to make sure that those Americans who were graduating high school knew how to do that. And that's not required anymore. And that's quote part of the, if you read books on the dumbing, I don't know if you had a chance to read some of the books on the dumbing down of American education. That's what
Yes.
they talk about. And you've probably read them. Yeah. Did you have homeschooling at all, or did you have public school back in the States?
I had a mix of private school, public school, and homeschooling.
Okay.
So I've done all
The
three,
whole
and
spectrum. Okay.
I didn't have a good because it was like I guess it's called free schooling, where I was basically
Mhm.
just able to do whatever I wanted
This is
and
which
choose
one,
what I
or all of
wanted.
them?
For homeschooling,
Okay, for homeschooling.
I
Okay.
was just allowed to do what I wanted. Of course, I had a few different things I had to do, like history and science, but and a little bit of math. But other than that, my family was pretty lenient. But in terms of the public education and even private education, this is one thing that I've noticed some people don't get
Hmm.
is it's still bad in private
Wow.
education. I mean, for example, I the last private school I went to was in middle school, and this was just outside of Denver, Colorado.
Hmm.
And in eighth grade, the last year I was there, they introduced a new class about that they labeled leadership class. But they started, no joke, showing us Teen Vogue videos before Halloween about what not to wear before Halloween, like
Wow.
cultural appropriation stuff.
Yeah.
And then there was tons of stuff like that. They brought in the Anti-Defamation League to our school.
Oh, no kidding. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
They sat us all down to talk
Wow.
about bullying. And first thing they did, sat us in a circle and had us go one by one, tell them our name, um, I think like our favorite color or something like that, and then what our pronouns were.
Hmm.
And when they got around to me, I said, "What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think I am? I hope I look like a male." And it just because it was crazy to see that. And then later on in the year, before COVID hit, actually, this was 2020,
Hmm.
um, just before I graduated from eighth grade, there was some weird thing. I think a kid was pretending to play, like, use a balloon as his phallus, basically, and just like dumb kid stuff.
Hmm.
But the mindset of these teachers and all the people there was immediately go to labeling it as sexual harassment.
Wow.
And that's what they did. And
Mm.
many, over a dozen eighth grade boys were accused of sexual assault and sexual harassment by the administration. Not as a legal charge, but they used those
So
words
now
to
they're
describe it. So
imprinting these children, these kids, and it's an imprinting is what they're doing when they do that kind of crap. That's unbelievable.
yeah,
That's just wild.
yeah.
It's
And you could see this huge divide between the boys and the girls all of a sudden, where the boys were afraid to be around the girls, and the girls looked at the boys as predators.
yeah.
Eighth graders. It was
Yeah.
wild. And then this was during COVID. Going into public schooling, I was in a public high school for about 2 or 3 months.
Hmm.
And first day of class, I show up just sitting in front of the computer, and the principal of the school is wearing a BLM, Black Lives Matter shirt.
Hmm.
The English teacher was wearing a Black Lives Matter shirt. And In English class, we were reading a book about feminism. In science class, we were talking about preferred pronouns. And randomly, before one math class, my teacher just started spewing out her favorite politicians, which included Obama and
Hmm.
some local school board guy. So it's people don't know how bad it is, actually, how bad education has become. And of course, that spreads on into college as well. There's
Hmm.
just so much filth that it's hard to see unless you're actually in it.
Hmm.
Because you send your kids to school thinking that they're getting an education, that they're learning the things that they need to learn to properly enter out into the world, but then their minds get filled with like fear and like really gross ideas with no productive stuff coming out of it. So yeah, it's huge bad experiences, man. Huge bad experiences.
Well, this is wild because and this is the reason we're talking about this book, and I'm hoping that people will pick up this book, and I'm realizing this book is not just for people your age and younger. It's actually for people, for men who did not have, let's say, fathers who really were there for them to give them an idea of what a man is supposed to be. And a man, it's kind of like I make comments a lot, which is like a perfect example. I actually posted in response on Facebook that a few years before my father died, I told my father, I said, Dad, I hate you. I do not like you, but I love you. And I told him that because I wanted him to know that because of what he taught me and the way he trained me and conditioned me, which would have been was extremely tough. Um, and some might even have considered that abusive, some of the stuff that I went through. Because it's interesting because a lot of Marines who go through the Marine Corps, especially from that generation, they think that their father is the Marine Corps, and that's
Mm,
actually how they became men, through that experience. And I
sure.
told him, I flat out said, and I said I love you, and I thank you, and I said I don't like you, which is to say that I don't want you to be my friend. I did not need you to be my friend. I got tons of friends. I got friends all over the world, right? I've always had friends all over the world since because I traveled since I was a kid. But I only have one father. Whether that would be a stepfather or be a blood father, but I have only one father. We all have one father who was there at that time, who's going to be the deciding, who's basically going to assist in where you're going to go and what kind of path is going to cause you to ask the questions. And I'm going to talk about questions because I complimented your dad on how he raised you by our conversation. Our conversation told me something very important about you that I don't even find in men my age, and that is that you ask questions and you don't automatically have the answer. That's actually a sign of a mature adult, is to know that you don't have all the answers, but most importantly, and this was drilled into my head from day one by my dad, is if you don't know, ask. Because if you
Hmm.
if you keep quiet about it, and this takes a level of confidence, because most people don't want to ask because they're afraid of being looked at as being dumb or just being an idiot, not getting it. And what
Right.
you're doing is you're cheating yourself, but also you're coming off as someone who's insecure. And the more you do that, you imprint your subconscious to become more like that. Like anything that you do, the more you repeat it, it becomes ingrained. And if you're doing what you're doing now, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I find very impressive about how your dad got you set up with this program, get you going on the preparation, is the idea that these are they're like tools. Like when I teach people how to shoot long range, when I used to teach people how to shoot long range or quarter combat, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I would give small little bits. Like first, let's learn about your sight. How does your eye come up? Let's look at just, pick out a target, and then you imprint that in your mind, and then from that you develop to actually bringing up a weapon and bringing it up to take a shot. And it's all these steps that keep on going. And then once you learn these basics, this is what I try to get across for people who are trying to understand what it is about special operations, special forces, what is special about special operations, special forces? The key about like special forces is an operator may not be a specialist in one weapon. But if you give that weapon to the person because he knows the rudimentaries and the mechanics of how a firearm works, he can extrapolate out from that by asking the questions like, how does this trigger work? How does this action work? How does the pointing system work? But you need to be
Right.
asking questions, and you also have to have that underlying basic understanding. And that's what the preparation does as I'm looking at that, and that's why I'm impressed about it. And what is the sticker price on this thing? Because when I is it $90 on Amazon, or is it changed, or is it
You
still
know, we set it originally for the hardcover
yeah,
as $100,
a
but
hundred bucks?
the price
Okay.
shifts all the time. Every time I look at it, it's
Are you
different.
but are
Sometimes
you offering it as a e-copy too, or is it strictly a hard copy?
copy, softback.
Okay.
We also have the an audiobook for
Oh,
it
perfect.
and
Okay.
a Kindle version.
Who did the
So
audio,
for
by the way? I'm just curious.
my dad did most of it, and
Oh,
then
good.
I did the audio for my
Oh, so
parts.
okay, cool. You didn't like hire out some other
Yeah,
good, good, good,
right.
good,
Yeah,
good, good.
yeah,
I mean, that's
exactly.
if you're a writer, that's all that whole sign. Well, you are a writer. You have your own Substack that you are cranking out. I mean, you're more disciplined than I am right now. I'm trying to get this book done in time for Christmas. But um, the it's at first I was hit by the sticker price, but then it's like I thought about it. It says if you can't afford this book, you can't even afford all the other things that need to be done. Which is to say that you're in
Mm,
a really deep hole that either you're going to have to rely on somebody who really cares about you and buys the book to get you to shake your mind up to get out of that state of mind that you've got into such an impoverished point in your life, which actually that's actually kind of like doing an intervention. I mean, if somebody wants to do an intervention for somebody, which is like your life is so fucked up, you need to get out of it, and somebody needs to slap you around. I don't know if you knew, but I worked for 8 years as a drug and alcohol rehab counselor for the Native American community in San Francisco after I came back from Alaska. And it was using the tools
wow.
that I learned to help deal with my post-traumatic stress that I had from 5 years in combat in Central America. My nickname at the house was the Hammer. And the reason I was called the Hammer is like all the other ones, a lot of them are women. They want to be
Mhm.
nurturing, they want to help, and I'm like, get the freaking shit out of your head and start focusing because you got a lot of things to do, and a lot of people who get into that whirlwind of PTS and self abuse. It's a self abuse when you're feeling sorry about yourself. You need to be shaken out of that and get lined up and back on track. It's getting on in target. In the military, we used to call it go back to your training. Go back to your training. And it's true. If you have a set of training, whatever that might be in speciality, and that's what the preparation is as I look at it. It's a training. And once you get into that training, you get back into that frame of mind. And then if you get back into the frame of mind, that's how I see people. We talked about like people who made lots of money and lost lots of money and made lots of money. And if you know how to do this, and everybody can, but they just need to
Mm.
have the hints because if you weren't raised that way, you wouldn't know this. And this is an opportunity for somebody because your dad's been very successful. The case has been very successful. They've had life experiences that enable them to actually build upon, and you are in the process of doing that yourself right now. And you've benefited already because if you're 20 years old right now, right?
Yes, sir.
And you
Yeah.
started when you're what, 18 on this program?
18. Yep.
18.
Hmm.
So in 2 years, you've advanced in a level that a lot of people that I've met, and like I've said, that I've met men and women who just don't have that level of maturity. There's a quality of maturity that if you have that, and you should have that, it's one of those things that I look at as like the year that I got out of prison in Vietnam back in '84, I wasn't a
Hmm.
kid anymore. And then because I'd already been in combat just before that, covering the people up in Thailand, and that involves trauma. And there's traumas that you're aware of and traumas that you're not aware of, and that actually develops people. And that's when I worked as a counselor for PTS. is that you confront the PTS by realizing this is something that defines you, and actually, instead of being something that can cripple you, it's actually something that you have to pull out the strengths of that enable you to have gotten through what you've gotten through that was so traumatic in the first place, right? And that's what plays out. That's why I'd asked you whether you'd had experience with the EMT, because my experience, I mean, that's how I got working in Central America was as a combat medic, where I tell people, the dead are just dead, but the ones that really gnaw at your mind are the ones who are screaming for help. And that is what affects the mind, is the emotional connection that you have to somebody, even somebody you never even met, except maybe on the battlefield, or if you're in a civilian in an environment as an EMT, someone who just got plastered, on a freeway, and you're trying to help them. You don't know them, you've never met them, but there you are trying to provide, and they're beseeching to you, they're begging you to remove the pain and to not let them die. And those are defining. And we had talked about that in our conversation where we talked about the military, that the military used to do that. And you used to see this, like I would see the difference. You don't see that as much anymore, but you're starting to see that again because the Sweden and Norway always had the draft, but Sweden has brought back the draft because fears of Russia and all that kind of stuff. And now you're going to see that maturity coming back, which is the realization of mortality. It's one thing to go on like plank or maybe go hunting squirrels or go bird hunting or deer hunting or whatever. But when you realize that the same kind of gun that goes and does all that stuff on the animals for hunting or for putting on the table, etc., can also put you at 6 feet under, that reality grows you up. And that's what I noticed immediately in you. And that is especially the aspect of asking questions, because it's wild. Like, there's a large number of people on my Facebook Messenger, following me. And it's like they'll write to me and then say, I didn't know you did this. I didn't know you did that. And it's like, all you have to do is put my name and Google it. My birth name, especially, and also, my author name. And if you put both names in there, it's like, it's just in your face. But there's so many people who are not willing to ask a question, which is like, who is this guy? Who is this person? And this is important because I know you and your dad had talked about it I think I'd heard an interview with someone else where you were talking about relationships. Like, oh, so how does this help you with women and stuff like that? I said, if you're asking questions and you're paying attention, you might save yourself a really bad divorce by losing 50% of what you own in the future.
Well,
Ask
that's
questions and pay attention and don't lie
yeah,
to yourself.
that's exactly right. Exactly right. 100%. Yeah, no,
So,
I mean,
yeah.
I completely agree. Completely agree.
So
I
getting
mean,
back to the tactics of the program,
mhm.
you first started with the EMT, and then you got into the piloting. And I mean, as I am a seaplane, a commercial seaplane pilot. I'm a bush pilot up here in Alaska.
Mhm.
Um, I'd always want to be a pilot, but I got sucked up into looking for the American MIAs in Vietnam and this whole thing, and that's what ended up to me being in prison in Vietnam, which it turns out that I'm supposed to be a writer. So that's why my specialty is I write memoirs, and they turn out to be adventure memoirs. Like the bestseller was the Bamboo Chest, about when I was in prison in Vietnam, and then after that there was the big one about what it was like to star on Discovery Channel on Treasure Quest Snake Island, and what the reality of media that I was able to see and investigate because I had the prior experience of doing that. And that's when I found out that my life, everybody has a life purpose. And if you're lucky, you get it when you're young. For other people, they don't find it until they have a midlife crisis in their 50s and 60s. I've tried to get away from writing. I hate writing, but I realize that I'm good at it. I get paid a lot of money to do it. And the reason is because that's what my job is. That's what I'm supposed to do. Everybody's supposed to do that. What is your purpose? And as you travel right now, at this point, that's not to say this is your full lifelong purpose, but is that one of the reasons that you were looking at flying? What was it about piloting that brought you? I mean, And the reason I'm asking this because it's not
Mhm.
specifically the idea of piloting. It's the idea that
Sure.
here's something that's out of the way, and this is not something that you just throw a little bit of money at. As you've noticed,
Yeah.
it's involved. Unless the military, which is what I was trying to do with the Marine Corps, which is to have them pay for it when I was a naval officer candidate. You know,
Mm.
but then I went on my Asia trip, so that was the end of that. But it led to something else.
Right.
I worked for the government, but in a totally different department, et cetera, et cetera. Um,
Yeah.
so we're using the example of your interest in piloting, which is it's
Mhm.
because the whole idea is these courses, these cores are set up that just about anybody can get going on them. And as you get going on them, they actually can pay you back to be able to continue to develop further in it. Is that not correct? Like I'm
That's
looking
correct.
like the investing, I'm looking EMT, you can get paid as an EMT. You worked on a ranch. If you're a builder, I mean, some of the really high points I really like about it, you're actually getting into trades again, which is like a large equipment operator. I mean,
Hmm.
there's an automatic job, a high paying job, on the North Slope in Alaska. You could immediately get a job after training, and it doesn't take that long. It's not like flying where you got to dedicate yourself to about 2 years. And if you need to get the hours to do anything else beyond that, you're looking either as a flight instructor job position, which means you have to
Yeah.
get your commercial. Well, you get your commercial, but then you have to also get your instructor's license. Or you can
Hmm.
go off and become a line pilot, where you're flying for the oil companies and you're flying surveyors up and down pipelines, like in Texas and in Arkansas, as a way to get the hours if you wanted to go to the airlines or you wanted to go to transport. Um,
Sure.
So we're talking about there's the EMT, which immediately pays you
Hmm.
back, and then you made another decision, which is piloting, which in the future could pay you a lot of money, but it could be a life altering experience for you in a way that a lot of people don't maybe recognize. What's the
Yeah.
difference
Yeah. I
between
mean,
those two? I personally am thinking, and I'll say after I hear yours.
honestly, because at the time when I chose to do the piloting stuff, when I first chose to do it, we had just finished getting through a massive breakthrough in writing the book,
Mm.
actually. And that was at the beginning of, or at the end of last year, actually. And that's when we came up with the idea of the cycles, of the 3 month periods, 3 month cycles in which you dedicate all your time to the main course, the main idea, which was either EMT or piloting or sailing or doing the heavy equipment operator course or the shelter, going to the Shelter Institute to learn how to build a house in Maine. That's when we came up with that and made that major breakthrough.
Hmm.
Um, and that was just piloting, getting your PPL was one of the main things that we added to that list.
Hmm.
So honestly, just getting started with it, there was no major thought behind doing it besides, oh, it would be really cool to know how to fly a plane. And it would be great if I could get the PPL within 3 months.
Hmm.
Because I think it is totally doable to get it in 3 months.
Hmm.
From what I've seen, depending upon where you're at, what time of the year you fly, what the weather is like, you definitely can. So it was just really starting it off just because it sounded cool. It sounded cool to hear, oh, I can fly a plane. That would be awesome. I had no real intentions beyond any of that, especially knowing that I couldn't actually really make money just with a PPL unless I went further and tried to maybe dedicate, like you said, up to 2 years or more trying to advance.
Hmm.
So the payback was less so about getting a financial benefit and more so just about learning a skill that happens to be very expensive. I
Hmm.
had uh, no major thought behind that. But since then, I think we found something better to replace just getting the PPL as a kind of jumping off point. There's one school, it must be in Florida or something, where they start people off just trying to get their oh, what is it? What's right below a PPL? It's like
Sport pilot,
lighter than
sport pilot.
I think it's Sport Pilot. And like I think that in terms of the preparation is a better starting off point, just getting the basics and learning the skill and not spending so much money
And
than
you're
trying
not
to
so
go for
focused on it. Yeah, because if you're just doing it for a personal experience, then there is no real need to get anything more than a sport pilot. You can only fly, VFR. There are other restrictions on it, but you can also do like a basic medical, basic med. So you don't even have to get all
right.
the like every 6 months I have to get mine because of my age and because I have a commercial license, so I have to get a second class. And if you get a first class, that yeah, it gets tighter and tighter, and then you're constantly going in for a medical checkout. After the age of I think it's 40. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
But now you look at that, and then you compare that with the EMT, and now the EMT immediately I'm seeing you can bring in cash with that, but also more importantly is that you can you basically can save a life. You might even save your own life, like you're backpacking and these skills, and you're now carrying a first aid kit, not just because, oh, well, you should carry a first aid kit. It's like exactly what's in that kit, and
Yeah.
exactly when and immediately how to apply it, as compared to
Yeah,
most people don't. But they
exactly.
carry
I
it and they
think
have it. Yeah.
100%. And I think EMT is much more applicable. The skills you learn as an EMT are much more applicable than skills you learn in flying.
Hmm.
At least day to day, they're more applicable because you don't need a literal aircraft to use those skills. Of course, there's navigational skills which can apply outside of flying. Sure, decision making skills that apply outside of flying, but I think in terms of like a great place for people to start off, especially young men who haven't done anything major in their lives. I think getting your EMT certification is a huge one because right off the bat, with I did an extended program which was 4 months. I could have done it in about 2.5, and I wish I
Hmm.
did. I just kind of crammed all that knowledge in, and then you can get out and you can start working 911, working in a
Yeah.
town or city.
Yeah.
Or you can also go the kind of outdoorsy route of getting your wilderness first responder or wilderness EMT
Yeah. Yeah.
certification. So you get
Yeah. That's a
a
good one.
huge other range of skills
Hmm.
with that. So and I think especially when you think about putting wildfires in the context of getting your EMT certification, you're going to make a lot more money even working on wildfires than
Hmm.
you would with especially dumping crazy amounts of money into learning how to fly. You're going to make more money over the course of, let's say, 2 years working on wildfires if they're good seasons. Let's say you get just 90 days out there each year, 180 days in total. As an EMT, you can get paid, let's say, a range of anywhere between 450 and $700 a day
Hmm.
out there working on wildfires. So you could do that for 2 years, or you could learn to fly for 2 years, and that's, you know, tens of thousands of dollars down the drain. You have great skills, which can eventually allow you to make more money than you would working on wildfires, but it's you have to weigh the options, and I think for people just starting off, the EMT direction is better.
Now, regarding the emergency quality of that, I was going to ask you about something because I've heard Casey and your dad talk. The subject has come up quite a bit just from an economic point of view about economic collapse, global economic collapse coming.
Mhm.
And actually, from what I've been observing, I'm saying it's going to be worse than just an economic collapse. I'm saying it's going to be worse than a Great Depression. I actually am saying that this is going to be a society buster. This is where we have a total, not just economic collapse, we have a total societal collapse And the reason is for that very reason. In the future broadcast that I'll be putting out, I'm going to go in depth into the stuff. I've actually shared some of it with your dad about the Dodd report, the Norman Dodd report. And I think I told you a little bit about it. That was
Yeah.
under the it was the tax exempt foundation investigations in 1954, where Norman Dodd was the lead investigator on that. And the report that he came back on, and basically how it started in 1908 is when they came together with this. And the Carnegie Endowment was put together in order to hijack the education system. And they started hijacking the education system in 1935, where they went to the original authors of textbooks, history textbooks, Charles and Mary Beard. And they went to them and says, if we pay you money and you'll never have to want of anything for the rest of your life, would you write your history books with the type of tone and intent that we would like you to write them in? And they said, hell no, because they were honorable people. They had, quote, your
Yeah.
dad likes to talk about virtue. Well, they were virtuous people, especially when it came to history. But you can always find some scumbags. And so they went to these other professors who were probably junior PhDs, and they created what is now called the American Historical Association. It's still active. As a matter of fact, the documentarian Ken Burns had an interview with them just a month ago. And Ken Burns, like Civil War, Vietnam, he did those documentaries. And I'm like, so this guy's part of it. And I'm realizing that a lot of people who are history professors and instructors have to be members of the association. You probably get the magazine, et cetera, but it looks good on your resume. These were 12 people who were put together back in the 1930s, and they were the ones who started writing the textbooks. So they modified our history. And what they've been doing repeatedly, and that's why I brought up originally the Department of Education, how our education system has plummeted, and what you've experienced, and what you're telling me, and our listeners are just listening to, is just flooring me. What they're doing in the classrooms when kids that age were able to do mathematics that people use calculators now to do. They're doing in their minds. They're calculating in their minds. Even look, my dad used a slide rule, all through engineering, all through getting his degree in electrical engineering, and now now they're going to be using Chat GPT in order to get the answer. So you're not going to use that.
Yeah.
So
and they
so
are
they're
using
dumbing
ChatGPT.
down. Yeah. So the power goes out. You have all these zombies walking around these cities. And that's where the societal collapse is going to come, because there won't be people to bring us back, because they don't have the knowledge. They don't even have the understanding. In the same way that we look at some very involved scientific instruments from like BC, from ancient times, that we don't know how to use, but they knew how to use. And that was lost when that society collapsed. Whether it was the Greek Empire or then finally the Roman Empire. And I think this is going to be the first real collapse since the Roman Empire. And people say, well, what about the Spanish Empire? And I'm going to differentiate the difference between an economic collapse and an empire collapse and a societal collapse. When you have a societal collapse, you have like the lights go out in the world. And it goes all, and that has been one of the things that's so intimidating about this is that we've become so internationally, so global, so intertwined with each other that when one gets sick, everybody gets sick and everybody collapses at the same time. And what's going to get us out are people who are thinking like you, who've been prepped by tactics as described in the preparation. That's why I've been so keen on your book. That's why I've been keen on so much on the program that you've put together, is that they have to get going on it now. They have to get thinking on it now. And one of the best things they can do for their children, man or woman, is to get them, reading that book and applying it. Because your book is not set in stone, right? It's basically just a framework within which to get going on. You could actually replace a lot of stuff in there with something else. We were even talking about just now about, exchange sport pilot for the PPL.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. But what do you think the future is going to look like, Cork? And what kind of skills, let's say five major skills, what skills would you want to bring into the future? If you
Uh,
were just starting off brand new, what do you think it's going to look like and what skills do you want to have?
well, the basic stuff is going to be um, food, water, shelter, and yeah, food, water, shelter, and community. You
Hmm.
need community, and there are people. It's like I get it. A lot of these survivalists, they contact me. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna just when things go down, I'm gonna just take off, and I go, you're gonna die. Oh, I'm gonna go to the park. I read some of this stuff, these comments, and it's like, oh yeah, and I hear this, I see these posts by women. Oh, a woman will say, "Oh, my daughter and I we're just going to jump in the car and drive up to the park," and they're like in Atlanta, so they're going to drive up into the national forest. And I'm going, first of all, there's going to be people already there before you get there. They're going to have killed everything that you need to eat, and they've either got it stringing, dried, and dead. That's my biggest concern is that even in where I live rurally in Alaska, there's enough people still here who could wipe out the population of moose. And that's the reason we have pigs. That's the reason, I say get into farming, but if you're farming, you know this personally, that you have to be doing it before an emergency comes. You can't just start it up when the emergency comes. You,
And you have to know that people are going to want to come to you because they know you have the stuff they now want.
exactly. But you also have to
And
protect that, which means that means
yes,
you need to have the guns, but you can't be the lone operator. You have to have a community that's going to protect it. So what I'm seeing is kind of like, it's kind of like a pendulum that swings, or like, when the ocean comes in, the tide comes in and the tide goes out. In the same way,
yeah.
we've had such an amazing expansion of our reality that
Mhm.
you can order lobster from Maine and have it freaking in Fiji within a few hours, within a day. That you
Yeah.
can get to that point so expansive in that matter that it'll just go all the way, but everything will swing back. That the only people you might know in a generation or two are just the people who live within your village. And that's it. Because you don't have that
Yeah.
connectivity outside except for the lone groups that go out and they're the traders and merchants the way it was originally, i.e., that's how like the Silk Road got going. It was people from Asia who knew they had goods and they were competing with everybody. And so they said, hey, well, we'll take it out to the West. And then they got all the way out to Italy and then vice versa, where you got the exchange of like noodles that came from Asia and then they become spaghetti. And then vice versa. That's why you have such a tie between ancient, not Rome, but um, Italy, where they had so many good trade routes. Not only, and that's the thing that people are just all stuck up on the land routes, but also on the maritime routes. So maritime is going to come back. Question is, do we have the technology still being supported for aviation? And if we do, it'll be in localized areas. I look at Alaska right now and I see it's going to be a situation. There's going to be a lot of people leaving Alaska because they never acclimated to Alaska. This is what's going to freak you out when I tell you what's happened up here. When I first
Sure.
lived here in 1991, um, 50 the amount of people who lived on imports was 50%. Right now,
Okay.
it's 90% of Alaska residents live on imports. That means
Wow.
they're everything that they're eating is a mango from Mexico. It's beef from Kansas. And this is including people who will actually go out and use their subsistence salmon license as an Alaska resident. Like as Alaska resident, we're allowed to go out and get 25 salmon and then add on to that five per household. So two people, it was a 30. Yeah, you can get 30. It's actually 32, so it's a little bit more than that. Yeah. 32
And you're
salmon. I mean,
still,
you can live off 32 salmon, but we have other stuff. We have moose, we have bear, but you have
yeah.
to go out and do it. But you need to actually bond with where your locality is. It's kind of like you and your dad, you're down in Uruguay. Ranching is big in Uruguay, like it is in Argentina and western southwestern Brazil.
Yep.
That's a culture, and it's also a community, and it's also stable, and most importantly, it's rural.
Hmm.
That's one of the biggest things I'm pushing to people. It says, I'll give you an example. I started making my plans to get back to Alaska in 2008. The reason was I had a teaching contract for the Korean Army military intelligence. I came back from that contract. I was in San Francisco. I did well, financially. I'm living in the high end of San Francisco. I go down to the local supermarket, Nob Hill, and this is right about. It was only it's laughable now, but it was only a 25-cent increase. This is during Bush, yeah, during Bush's presidency. It was only a 25-cent increase in fuel prices. That was enough for those of us who remember it. That truckers said, to hell with this. I'm going to stay home. I lose money if I work. So they stayed, and they had farms. A lot of them had farms, so they stayed home, raised whatever they had. They didn't have to travel, be away from home. But the effect of it was that for 2 weeks in one of the most affluent neighborhoods of San Francisco, the shelves were empty for 2 weeks. And the first thing that hit me is like, wow, this this is what happened when something as inconsequential as a 25-cent increase in fuel prices hit. What's going to happen when something real happens? And that real has been happening for the last 2 years. And we get little blips, we get little indicators that come up and they pop up and they tell you, whoa, what's the price on eggs? And then by whoever can kick the can down the road, they get that price on the eggs down. And this is the mentality of human beings. It's actually a mentality of saving energy. Why work harder when you can save the energy, which is what we're genetically predisposed, because it's like, whoa, we got to survive until the next mastodon we can kill, or big ancient rhinoceros, that we have to go and kill in order to eat. So let's not burn up our energy that we've built up by the last elephant that, last mastodon that we killed. And that mentality stretches into the idea, well, why go and do this? We're fine. Don't worry about it. The government will take care of it.
Yep.
And it's wild because that's a generational thing. This is the conditioning of the education system where the government will take care of it. Because if you ask those same questions of my father, who went through the Great Depression, or through my grandparents, my great grandparents, who there was no government to provide those things, you never said that. As a matter of fact, they were always telling, do not trust the government.
Yeah,
Trusting the
right.
government is a totally modern thing, and it's a conditioning.
Yeah,
And your training and the preparation is independence. And this is the thing,
yes,
independence. But independence that works with a community as compared to a collectivism, which is totally reliant on other people where you can't do anything by yourself.
exactly. And I mean, even you need that even more so now. I mean, from how I hear you speaking, I think you expect potentially total collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's reasonable to expect at this point. But even if it was a degree or two better than total collapse,
Oh
it's
yeah.
still going to be really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, young people now have nothing to look forward to in terms of the future. They're never going to own a home.
Mhm.
It's hard to afford groceries
That's
nowadays.
already happening. That's
Yeah,
already happening. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, just like you were saying about saving energy, why learn anything? Why question anything if I can't buy groceries for the week?
Mhm.
But you actually have to take the stance of, no, I have to question everything. I have to learn as much as I can so
Exactly.
that I can be in a position where I won't be reliant on other people or I won't be a victim of other people, depending upon how the future goes.
Mhm.
Even if the future somehow there's a massive miracle, everything turns around, you're going to be in a better position if you hold that mentality than if you didn't, because you'll have a number of skills that are going to make you more valuable anyway. More people are going to like you. You're going to have a larger network.
Mhm.
You're going to be able to make more money, have more resources. So either way, it's a huge important thing to do. It's just even more important now when there's an obvious steep downtrend in things. And I think there could be total cultural collapse for sure
Well,
as well.
there's one point I really wanted to touch on, which is you mentioned this in one of your articles on Substack. Oh, and where can people follow you on Substack? What is the address on that one?
Sure, that would be just Maxim Smith .com is one you can go to, and also the preparation.com.
Thepreparation.com. Cool.
Yeah.
You talked about something which in my own personal life, and that's why I've said what you're doing with this voyage that you've gone. We talked about Joseph Campbell privately, Joseph Campbell
Hmm.
and the hero's journey. This is what they were talking about in terms of like as when you're on your life path, you meet the people you're supposed to meet that you need to continue on your path. It's kind of like in when Joseph Campbell did the study of myth, he realized that there were commonalities in myths and stories throughout history around the world. For instance, let's the story of King Arthur. So King Arthur goes and meets Merlin, and Merlin gets him hooked up with a sword, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
Hmm.
he needs the sword in order to become the king of England or the known world at that time. He needs Merlin to be his advisor, his mentor. So you not only get the equipment that you need, you get the person who's going to instruct you on how to use the equipment and how to lead with that equipment. And the same way, like when I told you, like I was at the airport in San Francisco, and I had already told my commanding officer at the ROTC unit at Berkeley, I said, I'd already gone through INDOC. I went to Pensacola Naval Air Station. Did simulator and all kind of stuff. I thought I was going to fly the F-18. I would have loved to have flown the F-18. But I just had this burr that I had to find out what happened to the American MIAs and see if I could help bring them back. And the way I could do that was as a journalist. And what happened was, I'm there at the airport. I've got my cameras. I don't even know how to use a camera professionally. I just bought the camera.
Really?
I didn't even know how to use the cameras. But I
Wow.
knew that I had an eye. And I had an eye because I looked at all my dad's magazines, Newsweek, Time Magazine, Life Magazine, National Geographic, especially because the photography was always the best in National Geographic. And I was actually doing what you would do in college. So why spend the money going to college to go become a photojournalist instead of just like looking at a bunch of magazines and go, oh, so you start copying, and that's what you do. It's kind of like with the Navy SEALs and Special Operations, they talk about fake it until you make it.
Hmm.
You model and you interpret what you think from what you see, and then you try to do the same thing. It's a very great way to learn something and then be actually become proficient in it by observing what other people are doing. And for me, it was with the eye, but I didn't have any contacts in Thailand. But this is the serendipity that I really wanted to talk with you about, which is the idea that I opened up back in those days. There was the pink section in the San Francisco Chronicle, which was all the new movies, what was new, it was like TV Guide, et cetera, et cetera. And there was a TV movie coming out with Michael Landon. He'd made it with this star from Indonesia playing John Everingham, Australian combat photojournalist, and his wife Keo, who was a Lao uh, uh, beautiful Lao woman, some from some type of royalty, as I had heard. Uh,
Okay.
but he actually took. Did you ever get into scuba diving yet, or no?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
I
great.
got
So
my
you know what an
water
octopus
certificate.
rig is? You know what an octopus rig is? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So he used an octopus rig to swim. He did it three times. The second time they were throwing grenades off the. So he got thrown in prison. This is interesting about the mentor. You got to watch out because he also got thrown in prison by the communists after years of covering the war. Until they realized he became a spy smuggling not for the agency but for Newsweek, smuggling out photographs of what was really happening in Laos after the Pathet Lao took over at the end of the war. But his girlfriend, who would then become his wife, Keo, uh, she couldn't leave. So they threw him in prison and then they walked him through Vientiane to the border of Thailand and then said, you're out of here. And they said, you can't come back, persona non grata. But he wanted to get his girlfriend, Keo, back, who would become his wife. And three tries swimming under the Mekong River, which in itself, and this is pretty interestingly done with Michael Landon playing John, swimming under the Mekong River And for those who don't remember, but it was Mac Lana, of course, from Little House on the Prairie. I mean, he was the big, that was his big claim to fame. Yeah. Um, and so John did do this. So John swam under and he got on the last try. And there were guards who were watching, grabbed her, just basically yanked her into the water at the meeting point that they tried 3 times. This time he just grabbed her and just stuck the regulator in her mouth and swam under the Mekong River. And this became an article that he wrote for Reader's Digest called Love is Forever. And that was actually what became the name of the movie, which was because of the Reader's Digest article that John had written. Well, this TV movie was coming out that week as I was leaving for Thailand. And my dad said, "Do you even have any contacts?" And he gave me his contacts, which were all contacts he had when we lived in Vietnam during the war and throughout Asia. And it's interesting because so it was the two together that worked beautifully. So my dad's contacts were able to contact through the Foreign Correspondence Club of Thailand to get hooked up with John. And the conversation with my father, which is like, "Do you have anybody?" And I go, "Oh, yeah." So I'm like reading the article and I go, "Oh, this guy's in Thailand." They go, "John Abraham." And it was the idea that I knew I needed to get out of here and I needed to go and do this. And I don't, and sometimes you don't, do you find yourself, you don't know why? Well, the piloting, why? Well, consciously, it's kind of like when I worked in marketing, it's like you work on the subconscious, which is people make a decision emotionally and then they consciously qualify why they made them. Like, I want to buy a Mercedes Benz because it gets me the chicks and it's high, but then but it's German made. So then the critical thinking is, oh, it's German made and it's precision made and it's always going to work and I can always rely on that German made vehicle, right? But the emotion is like, it's going to give me the chicks.
Exactly.
And you and here we're talking about, so you wanted to fly, you wanted to fly. There's something within you that say, "Oh, let's go and become a pilot." But then the conscious mind saying, and the reason is because you're going to start doing technical things, and it's actually going to, and actually it's kind of like in the military where you are going to be in a very dangerous situation when you fly, especially if you screw up, as we notice from all the crashes that we've seen. I've seen a lot of crashes up here, that I always read the reports. I try to find out why they crashed, what were the conditions of why they crashed, how did they screw up, or you've got pilots. There was a guy, Tweedo. He was from that TV show that they were filming up north. I don't know if you saw that one.
No.
Like flying in the north, and he crashed, and he has like 40 years experience. And what happened was the wind changed. And so he suddenly had a gust that now just flapped him down in the ground and dead. So you look at these things and you try to discern on them. But the reason I bring up the idea of when I went to Thailand to first become a combat photographer, and I was 18 years old. I was 18. I was in combat when I was 18, sneaking across the Mekong Delta with the not the Delta, the Mekong River up in Laos, Thailand, with the Hmong Hill tribe people. And to be in that situation where just a few months earlier, I was at UC Berkeley studying to be an electrical engineer. And I was with plans to become, a lieutenant, an ensign, and fly jets for the Marine Corps. Well, not an ensign. I would have been a second lieutenant going in for the Marine Corps, and to go from that to that. But it was my life path. I knew that I had to do it. I didn't know why. In the same way, you're scrambling around, your dad's looking, he's trying to help you, and boom, here you're in the situation. And we still have a question where you're going to go with that, but you're on a path that's actually a solid path as you continue on that path. And my question about this is, we talked about this, the idea of the serendipity aspect, because you did mention this in your article on the Substack, where it's like you find the people who are going to get you to the next step. For instance, if you're supposed to fly, then you're going to meet the pilots who are going to take you, do this and do that. And you and I have even talked about like log home building, because I'm going to build a handcrafted log home, and we'll talk about it later, but it's like, you're welcome to come up and learn the skills. As a matter of fact, I'm it's a skill that you learn and then you have to keep it going. So I've got a friend, he was Marines, and then he worked for the agency as GRS, and now he's a photographer up here. And I said, hey
Wow.
man, I got to finish this chicken run, but I'm doing it timber frame. So you'll learn how
Mm,
to do all the notches that you'll need, because he wants to get a homestead. He wants to buy land and build
yeah,
a handcrafted log home on it. And he's going to help, next year with the build. But I said, hey, you can help me right now and learn the skills of notching on how to cut the notches to set it up where you're not using nails, because it's a better building when you do it that way, and you don't have to buy nails. You have everything that you need out there in the field to do it. So it's a
exactly.
question of, how is it with the serendipity that you're meeting these people that you need because you are on your life path, wherever that takes you?
Well, I mean, serendipity is one of I remember talking about it to a woman the other day who came by here. We were hosting some event, and there was this clear moment of serendipity where one younger guy whose family had lived in Venice. He's English Italian,
Mhm.
and somehow I think it was about architecture, and his family was involved in architecture in Venice. And then this woman, her one of her dissertations a long time ago was about that specific architecture from that specific family in Venice. And the two of them meeting is an example of that serendipity that just kind of happens randomly from time to time, where all these, like, seemingly, as you know, seemingly impossible things come together where two people meet or some random thing happens. Random thing happens. But I think the more you try interesting things, the more you can see this, and you see the people reaching out to you, just like you said, the people that you should meet or are supposed to meet, whatever that means. It ends up just working out in ways that if you measure all the you can't even measure all the variables that it would take to meet that person or be in that place at that time. It just happens. And I'd say it's happened to me in the last 2 years, probably about 6 or 7 times to varying degrees of importance
Mhm.
or interest. And it's one of the most interesting things of it all is that you see that there is something, things are supposed to go a certain direction,
Mhm.
clearly. And when you align with that, there's some reverence for life itself that's hard to describe. But I think serendipity is a symptom of or a sign that you are doing the right thing.
And
Because
that's one of the reasons I'm asking that, is because for someone to actually go on the path that's being asked in the preparation, there's a
yeah,
level of trust that, am I doing the right thing? Am I blowing money by buying this book? Am I uh, living a fantasy? Or for people, like I say, this isn't just a book for young men, teenagers. This is actually a book that anybody who may have, quote, lost their way and says, wow, like a midlife crisis, 50s, 60s, 40s, say,
hmm,
God, I worked in this for freaking years, and I just don't want to do this anymore. And I realize that maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this, or maybe I was never supposed to be doing this. What do I want to do? And like for me, it's flying. I didn't get back into flying. Like I told you, I had that experience when I was in tech, back in 2000, and I went to
yeah.
a horrible school that I wrote about for what was it, Athlon Outdoors. That Yeah. Did you read that article, by the way, about the flying?
I read part of it. I
Yeah.
mean, it seems like such a common experience,
Common.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah. And that's why they jumped on that article for me to write it for. It was, man, it'll fucking blow you away. And two crashes. The high point was the two crashes by the school before they finally closed. And it was, I guess it was just not my time at that time. to fly. I had other things that I had to experience. I never would have gone to Korea to do that instructing contract, and I never would
Mm.
have come back from that to be in San Francisco to like, whoa, I need to get back to Alaska because things are not going to be good. And I don't know how soon
Yeah.
it's going to happen, but it might be sooner than later. And I'm happy that, here we are. We have our acreage, we have our land, we have the animals with on the land. I can hunt, I can walk 5 minutes, I can be fly fishing, on a stream, for salmon, steelhead, whatever. Um, I'm a pilot. I can get on a plane. I can fly wherever I want to get anywhere else. And this would not have happened if I didn't have quote the bumps that like made me go left instead of going right or stay on the same path that I was on.
Hmm.
And we always have to be questioning that. And it's one of those things. It's like there's a point where you're asking yourself, is it just the challenge of getting to where I want to get, where I'm supposed to be according to my life?
Yeah.
Or is this an actual indicator like you shouldn't be doing this and you need to be going that? And one of the indicators I've noticed is like, wow, when you're on the path you're supposed to be, there are the challenges. Like I almost got killed, on the border with Thailand. I mean, that was like the first time I was almost got killed. I almost got killed when I got taken prisoner on that island in 1983 in Vietnam. Many times I almost got killed in Central America, but I didn't. And it's because no matter how traumatic it may have been, no matter how challenging it may have been, I was always meeting the people I was supposed to meet along the line to be on that path that I'm supposed to. And I think that's where the maturity comes from is you realize, wow, I was supposed to do that. Where you can go to somebody when you're in your 50s and you're in your 60s and 70s, 80s, 90s, and you can come back and says, you know what? I would never trade my life with anybody else's because this is the life that I was supposed to live. As compared to someone who's on their deathbed and says, God, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd been with that person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You wouldn't
Yeah.
get that unless you take the steps. And that's what I mean, isn't that what really the preparation's about and the idea that you can trust yourself to make those steps?
100%. I mean, I think the idea of the preparation and why it's so important and extends beyond like linear life paths. It extends beyond age groups. Like you said, it's not just for young men, it's also for we've had people in their 70s tell us that they are going to start it.
Cool.
It extends uh, across many different lines, and I think that's because it comes back to the major thing of importance, which is what type of person, specifically, what type of man do you want to be? Because that defines everything. That shapes the entirety of your life. That is the only thing that really matters,
Mhm,
is the kind of man you are. All things stem from that.
mhm,
Once you determine what kind of man you want to be, the entire world is reframed in that thought process. And all of a sudden, you start doing the things you think you should do. You start doing the things that you think the man you want to be would do. You
mhm.
start acting differently. You start speaking differently. And all of a sudden, you start doing the things that would allow for more moments of serendipity to happen. And I think that's where things line up because I think people have natural wants and desires that are unexplainable
Mhm.
and that naturally align with the higher version of who they
Right.
could be.
Mhm.
And I think that is expressed outwardly when somebody aligns themselves with that, like it specifically describes the type of person they want to be
Mhm.
and then acts it out in the real world. I think everything lines up in that point. And I think part of it also is adding virtue and morality into the mix. And
Mhm.
that's where we bring back the ancient virtues,
Mhm.
and that allows for a better uh, good, and good in the truest sense of the word, expression of a man.
Mhm.
So at that point, I think that's where everything stems from, and that's why the preparation is so important. Is because yeah, you have all these skills we say you should learn, and here's where you should go specifically to learn this or that. Here's the different online courses you should take. But beyond that, it's let's go back to the fundamentals, which have been completely forgotten.
Yeah.
What type of man do you want to be?
Hmm.
That's the main thing. That's why it's so important.
Stoicism, basically, yeah, going to a stoic understanding of
Right.
what it
Well,
means to be a man, which has been so lost. I wanted to talk about something, just a
mhm,
quick one, because I know we're stretching in, but we have such good information we're sharing with people. Spirituality.
mhm,
I get a feeling of spirituality from you. I definitely get it from your dad, and I it's interesting to watch because Casey describes himself as an atheist. My father. It's interesting because when I listen to Casey talk, it's almost like I'm listening to my father sometimes. It's almost like they went to the same schools, both born in Chicago.
really.
My dad graduated from the Illinois. He was born in Chicago in 1930, but then was raised in Spokane, but then went back to Chicago to get his
Mhm,
degree in the late 40s. But then Korea happened, and then he had to finish it by the late 50s with the GI Bill. Um, but he was a self-described atheist. My father was a flat out atheist, scientific, critical thinking, can't allow that because it doesn't make sense. And I said, well, Dad, that's interesting because you're telling me that you can prove that there is no God. So I mean, I
mhm.
can accept you as an agnostic, but can you really say you're an atheist? But Casey describes himself as an atheist too. And but your dad comes off as having an awareness of quote a God or a spiritual aspect to himself. And I'm wondering, do you find that in yourself? And the idea that you're talking about a serendipity, that in itself is starting to say there's a part of your subconscious that's connected to something else. And whether that's the subconscious connected to the soul or the soul connected to the subconscious of your mind that enables you to read the path, that enables you to meet the people that you need to meet in the future.
Yes.
And how do you attribute that? Do you attribute that strictly from a mental synapses going on in your brain, conscious and subconscious, or is there a spiritual side to it, or there's not a spiritual side to it? How would you describe that?
Definitely. More so, it's mainly a spiritual thing. Um, just because I think it's, especially when you leave the natural order and return to doing things in a non-linear way,
Mm-hmm.
and you start going out to the world and doing more stuff, expanding your horizons. I think it's really hard to miss the fact that there's just a lot of there's an undercurrent of something unexplainable in everything and something unexplainable in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be reckoned with at some point. I mean, serendipity has to be reckoned with at some point. You can, I guess, if you want to be scientific, you could go, well, yes, there's an infinite amount of variables, but somehow all of it lined up, and that's just how things work. Just
Mm-hmm.
like the Big Bang. Somehow
Yeah.
these two
We're
things
supposed to
collided out of
accept that.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. We can say we can allow for one miracle,
Mhm.
right? And then everything else is scientific. But um, I think you see it naturally when you do more things, and it's unexplainable, has to be reckoned with. I mean, even just the idea, if you go back to the ideas of virtue, and the feeling you get when you are virtuous is unexplainable. It's an unexplainable good
Mm-hmm.
when you act in a higher way.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that through any stretch of time, courage, integrity, all of these different virtues have been valued. There's something behind that, something that lies within it that is unexplainable in any logical manner.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, oh, well, if you're courageous, that allows you to, I don't know, work better with the people around you, or if you have integrity, then maybe your survivability goes up because people don't want to kill you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can explain all these things in a logical way,
Mm-hmm.
but there's there's something in it, and I think you notice it at some point. You have to. It's right in front of your face that there's so much going on, and just I mean, even the idea of existence itself is makes no sense. It
Yeah.
doesn't actually make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So from that fact alone, there's some spiritual aspect to things, but there's a wholesome spiritualness in in life itself, and that's more obviously seen when you live and do a lot of different things and
Exactly. You have
experience
an
a lot of
opportunity
different
to
things.
experience all those values and qualities of that
Right.
life experience. That if you just got into a slave job and you just did what you're supposed to do, or you just made the amount of money, it's interesting. Casey had made a comment said that you're well on your way to becoming a millionaire, and it's just like, well, what if he doesn't want to be a millionaire? It's like, what if he realizes that there are things that you can get that have nothing to do with money, but other people would think that that's the only way you can get it, and that was the
Sure.
interesting thing about that. But the idea that you're taking the path and you're the more you walk on the earth and you pick your steps, the more you're aware of all the things that are on the path. That most people never
Hmm.
even take that path. If you look at the number of people who end up in the lives that they end up in, and that's a choice too. It may not be the choice they wanted to, and they'll say, well, that's what I was because I had kids, I had this or I had that. But but if you really look at it, that's an excuse. You know what I'm saying? If
Yes.
it's because we meet people who do have the kids, they go off and they do the adventures and everything, and they still um they go through the life experience that they were supposed to have. And part of that is the challenge of having to raise those kids if they had those kids when they wanted to go and do that life path. But in the end,
Hmm.
they achieve things that they never would have achieved before. And that could even, if we talk about quote wealth, what is wealth? And that brings the other kids. Is money wealth? Because as we're learning right now, that quote what people were taught was wealth, which is paper money, fiat currency, and people who have millions of it and multi-millions of it are suddenly going to find out they have nothing as compared to people
Yes.
who have real wealth, and those are the
Yeah.
people who can come back. Those are
Hmm.
and that's what I try to remind people, the people who really understand true wealth, they realize it's not fiat currency. And even gold. I mean, I'm into gold. Your dad's into anybody who's paying attention, who understands gold and some metals is wealth. But real wealth is the idea is wisdom is applied wisdom. That's true
Yes.
wealth. You can't get that except through life experience. There's no way to get it. You can't even read about it. I mean, you can read about the classics. You can read the classics. You can listen to the classical music. The classical music puts you in a state, a mental state that enables you to
Hmm.
absorb more information. That's great. But it's after all that you've done that you get yourself the wisdom, the real wisdom, the wealth wisdom that enables you to reach a level of poverty because maybe you stepped where you shouldn't have stepped. You should have zigged where you should have zagged. But if you're not dead, you can come back and you can. That's why you have people they talk about, oh, well, I also lost my millions and then I got millions back again. I lost millions and then I got millions back
Right.
again. It was just an education for them to say, okay, you've been down this path and now it's time to change. And then boom, they get back on the other path and suddenly everything starts, it's a gravy train again because they're on the
Yeah.
right path again. What I see is they knew how to get on the right path again. And that takes life experience and the wisdom from that life experience that you can only get through experiences as you're setting up with these core evolutions, I call them, where you
Hmm.
go through these different trainings and it's your self training. That's the beauty of it is you pick where you want to go and you go with it. The other stuff, and that's what I like about it, is that it's kind of like the electives you would get in college. You also have that there. They can go and study the classic. They can go and study religion. They can go and listen to this type of music. And all those are to an aside to the actual base curriculum, which is you're going to try welding, you're going to try large equipment operating, you're going to do EMT, you're going to do piloting.
Hmm.
Because in piloting, like you get the mathematics, you get the calculating, you do the wealth accumulation. You're going to do understandings of how markets play. You're also going to do marketing and sales. That is one of the most important things. That's one of the things that my dad really, because he was in marketing and sales, even though he came from a background of engineering. So He went the traditional route, and they were always
Yeah.
pushing me to do the traditional route. But most of the stuff that he learned, I picked up. I know how to trade in foreign countries because I watched my dad trade in foreign countries. My dad became the director for Asia Pacific Rim for Kohler International from
Mm.
1972 until 1977. So it started in just an office in Singapore. I mean, in an extra off a room, a bedroom in the house when we got there in '72 after Vietnam, all the way up to a high rise where they had the whole floor for Kohler. And when we talk Kohler, I'm talking about like you probably got a Kohler plumbing fixture, you got a faucet, you got a toilet, you got a generator. It's Kohler. My dad was a director from Hawaii all the way to Iran, all the way down to Australia, New Zealand, all the way north to Taiwan, South Korea, based in
Nice.
Singapore.
Yeah.
Now, you hang around with somebody like that, you go on vacations, you learn things like you're out in the Philippines and they, at that time they were selling boat engines. And I remember vividly, my dad was actually selling to the rep. He was showing the rep on how to sell these engines in the
Mm.
Philippines. And so, you ever seen those? They're like pangas, like in Mexico, you got the panga longboats, but then they have a
Yes.
motor in it. But instead of like just a straight prop down, they'll have what we call the shrimp tail. There was the shrimp tail boats, we call them in Asia, where it has a long shaft instead of short, so you can lift it up. It's kind of like in Louisiana, they use them like for mud props. Yeah.
Y- Yeah, I've seen
So
those.
it's one of those, and we're out there and I'm watching my dad, and I can just see. So you pick up in the same way that you have observed your dad do business. You pick that up, and you have that. So you innately have knowledge and skills. Quote, they like to call it osmosis. It's like I try to get across to people. It's just like the reason I became a great shooter, and ended up going through a lot of very refined military training regimens. Um,
Yeah.
is as a kid, my dad got me a pellet gun. So every time we came back, because you couldn't have a pellet gun in Singapore, couldn't have a pellet gun in the US, in Vietnam, no guns whatsoever. So every time we went to go and visit my grandparents in Spokane, we'd always go up to a lake, and I had a Daisy Crossman BB gun. And so I worked on my eye. So I can do things that I try to teach to other people, and it takes a whole different type of training regimen to get them to be a snap shooter. And snap shooting is where you can just bring it up to your shoulder and boom, the rifle shot goes off and it hits the target. And that's because of eye coordination that is in it. And they say, oh, well, he's a natural. Nobody is a natural. Nobody.
Yeah.
He was always,
Right.
he's not a natural. What happened is he just started doing that long before you did or she did, uh, because it's in their family. It's like, well, why is perfect example, why is somebody really good with women? Why is a guy so good with women? It's because he's talking to girls all the time. He's talking to girls because he's got sisters. It's like, and he likes talking to his mom. And so he's a great gabber. And so he's a natural. Somebody's good at sales. Well, it's just like when they were a kid, they say, hey man, I just got a bunch of gum. You buy so he learned quickly how to like buy a
Mhm.
big bag of gum and then sell each one of them for 2 to 3 times the price of what it cost for each one that was in the bag. That's a kid
Yeah.
learning how to do that. By the time he gets to high school, he's selling bigger stuff. And by the time he gets to college, he's paid college. So it's it,
Hmm.
it's taking the step. And how do you get to the point of like the challenge? Well, I'm not going to give you any, what was the stuff you would get as a kid? Where your parents would give you a little bit of cash, like here's gum money or ice cream money. It's like, no,
An
around.
allowance? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
allowance. It said,
Yeah.
no, we're cutting the allowance now. And the best thing you can do to your kid is like, no more allowance. Right when they're about 10 years old, they go, what do I do? What do I do? Okay. I'm either gonna go cut lawns or
Sure.
I'll go to one guy and say, hey man, did you get allowances? Yes. How much did you get? $10. Why don't you give me $10 and I'll give you $20 by the end of the week. You take the $10, you go buy a bag of gum, give it back, and then you sell that gum. You double. You got your profit. Now you can go buy your own gum. He's already made a double profit. He can go buy over what he wants, and now you now have a marketing networker who's going to be like pro. And by the time they're out of college, or if they even go to college, they say, "Why should I go and do that? I'm buying real estate now, and trading real estate
Hmm.
or metals or whatever it is, or trips. Hey, I go
Right.
down to Mexico, and it's just like you have amazing times down there. What are you doing? Or they go to Europe or whatever. It's like, can I go with you? Sure. And then you set up the whole trip. And so this is how much it's going to cost, and you tell them this is part of my fees for getting the thing. You are now a travel agent. Boom, and you're doing it for yourself. So it's all these things, but you don't get the question. Remember, that's where I started off with the idea that what the main point. I didn't tell your dad why. I just wrote to your dad. I just texted your dad and said, "Man, you did right. Your son is well on the way to being successful at anything, and it's because you ask questions. You don't. You flat out told me I don't know. A couple times I asked you, and said, I don't know, and then I could tell that you're going to go find out. But also, you were asking me questions. And so what do you think about this? And what do you think? So what would I do about this? You're asking questions. So you don't always know everything, but more importantly, you don't keep quiet with it. You ask questions. For me, it was in journalism. That when I became a journalist and I had to go at 18, I had to go off to a foreign country. You're going to
Yeah.
starve to death if you don't talk to people. And marketing, sales, and journalism are almost exactly the same. You need to communicate and interact with other people. You also have to interact with enough people to realize what kind of people you want to be around and people you don't want to be around because they're either
Sure.
toxic or they're dangerous. Yeah. And that's the
Hmm.
reason I was impressed with, and that's why I said, we got to do this. Let's do the talk. Let's get people on the program. Let's get people who, like I say, you said you've got people who are in their 70s who are going to do the preparation.
Seriously.
I totally believe it because I've met people in their 70s. It's like, wow, you are still at a stage where you should not be if you've gone through life.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like I said, it's calling back to the fundamentals of what actually matters. And so people really want that. People really want that. And it enriches your life. I mean, I know for a fact,
Mhm.
even just by hearing all the stories from you, that your life is infinitely richer than it would have been otherwise because of all that you've learned and done. And that's what we're trying to help people recreate in their own lives now is just making life more rich, calling back to what's meaningful, doing all that. So yeah, I think it's working. I think it's working. We'll see how it goes from here,
Yeah, and
honestly.
I'm looking forward to. I hope we get to do another interview again, in the future, like in 6 months to a year, where I can say, "Hey, where you been? What have you been doing? Let's share with
Hmm.
people what's happened, and hear about the joys and the rewards and the successes, but also talk about the failures and like, dang man, I went down this road and I had enough experience already to realize, whoa, I got to stop and just get on another track or whatever, or I learned to barrel through it, and here I am on the other side, and it's just like I learned everything I need to learn from it, and I achieved what I brought the rewards from that, and I went and it took me into another track. So,
Yeah, exactly. Well, the next time we talk, I will have been to Southeast Asia, so I
oh,
think
good,
I'll have
cool.
some
That'd be
stories
good.
from there.
Keen
Yeah,
to hear what
that'll be
that's gonna be
good.
like for you. Cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Max. The Maxim Smith, and the book was written Maxim Smith, Matt Smith, and Doug Casey. How can people find the preparation? Where's the best way? Talk about what your portals are into the public.
Yeah, sure. So the best place to go to find the book is Amazon.com. And like I told you, Cork, we have it as Kindle, audiobook, hardback, softback. Um, the hardback looks the best, even though it's the most expensive. And if you're handing it to someone who you think it will sincerely benefit, because we've had lots of people give this book to neighbors, nephews,
Mhm.
brothers, cousins. Um, the best thing to give them is the hardback because
Mhm.
there's some meaning in having hardback. It's basically saying this is something worth preserving.
It's
It's
important.
nice
Yes.
exactly.
Mhm.
So even though it's like the most expensive, it's 100% worth it, and it's all of the college textbooks you need combined into one book.
I,
That's
I can
less than
attest from
100
having
pages.
read it. Yeah, I've actually read it. A lot of people interview. They said, well, I haven't read it, but I've just, I've heard about it. So I said, no, man, I've read the thing. So
Yeah.
I want to tell everybody I did read the thing from front to end, and that's why I'm making the statements that I'm making based on my interactions and having read the book. Um, uh, if you get the hard copy, do you get the audios with it? Because sometimes
No,
they're
the
totally
audio is
separate.
completely
Okay.
separate. Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I say that is that uh, one of the good things, and I was even thinking about it just now, is that the idea that, we learn, I like try to get across that one of the ways we learn is each person has their own, everybody learns on all levels of the visual, audio, and kinesthetic. But some
Mhm.
people are more like we were talking before in the previous talk that like I'm visual. I'm very visual. That's why when I became a comic photographer, I'm into photography. That's why I'm a good shooter. So, et cetera. And flying, flying is very visual as you're coming in on the numbers, or there are no numbers, and you're doing, a remote
Yeah.
strip and everything, or you're landing on the water. Um, so I was wondering for people who I would actually even recommend that you get the audiobook, because if you get the audiobook, you can replay it, and it's like having your own mentor to hear them telling you, okay, this is what you got to do, and you can actually use it because my background is a hypnotherapist. I'm a certified, clinical hypnotherapist, where you use audio. You're talking people into a dream state and focusing in success. And that's one of the things is like buy the hard copy, but I'd also recommend get the audio too, because you can replay it and you can even use the audio if you do any type of meditation or subconscious training. Um, so I think
That's
maybe
that's
that
a
would.
hundred percent that's 100% true. And that's a good point, actually. I mean, listening to How to Win Friends and Influence People is a
Yeah,
completely different experience than reading it.
exactly. Exactly.
And it hits you differently. So
Mhm.
yeah, I agree with that. And then besides that, besides Amazon, we also, like I said, do have the preparation.com,
Oh,
which
okay.
is a
The
Substack page
preparation.com.
people can go to. And then last thing would just be maximsmith.com again,
Okay. And then you have
which is my own.
Substack is it's just the Substack, and it's under just Maxim Smith.
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Max. Talking to you this
Thank you,
time.
Cork.